Early. We've got some experts that want to break this down as well. It's really telling to listen to some of these press conferences as well.
All right, so let's find out what some of our experts are thinking about what's been going on this morning. We start with Jamie Copenhaver. We also have Chris Hinn, our Middle East expert, both of them in the House for us this morning. Thank you, gentlemen, both for being here. Jamie, let's start with you. We just heard them release the name of one of the officers who was injured in all of this. I can't imagine, coming from a law enforcement perspective, because you have been a law enforcement officer for much of your life, what this is like for these guys to be out there, knowing this suspect is extremely dangerous.
The key parts we need to listen to in these press conferences is I don't think they clearly know where the second person is, and they're almost demanding that the citizens stay inside and stay indoors, not to expose themselves for a potential hostage situation.
All right, and let's get over to you and talk a little bit, Chris, about what you're seeing as far as these suspects are concerned, because I think one of the things that might be most surprising to people is to hear that they have a Chechen background.
Well, you're dealing with a whole total different mindset now. This is not the Middle East. The Chechen is, of course, the Eastern Bloc of Russia. You're dealing with a real hardcore of individuals who are determined. And the only reason I can say that with authority, I was involved with the 2005 bombing of the Chechen aircraft, part of the investigation team. And I saw a lot of things that we couldn't understand, but now it makes sense. So they are determined. They're not suicide bombers, although they act like suicide bombers, and they use the same material. However, they are determined, and that's something that should concern our law enforcement community.
Yeah, Christopher, is that the concern we're talking about? They described this second suspect, a 19-year-old, as a terrorist that came here to kill. And now it's the terrorist that's probably learning his brother has died if he was not there when that happened, and seemingly has nothing to lose. Is that the real concern for investigators right now when he's on the loose?
Well, you got two kind of, you want to call them terrorist attackers. One, the suicide bombers, they're on a mission, and they're going to go with the package. This one are military trained, and they are determined to go to the next step and to the next level. If you recall, the theater where the 350 people were killed by the Chechen hands. However, it just seems that we got to start looking at those individuals very closely and understand what they're going to do next and how they're going to get to the next step. We need to be proactive. This is the key, proactive with our law enforcement community.
Jamie, one of the things I think is interesting is that law enforcement, FBI officials have said from the beginning that they had no chatter at all about anything possibly happening in Boston or at the marathon. What does this say a little bit about our intelligence and perhaps the way that intelligence gathering is changing?
I don't think in this case it was an intelligence breakdown. I think the feds did their job. I think, unfortunately, these two nutcases essentially are operating probably on their own accord without any direction from anyone outside of the U.S. Too early to tell, but that's what I would suggest.
It seems like the one concern right now, and not only looking out for public safety, but a hostage situation, is that one big reason they're coming out now with a little information to tell the public, stay off the streets. The last thing they need is this guy with his explosives, with his mindset, perhaps holding a family hostage as well?
Well, and Chris pointed out, I mean, now this guy probably knows his brother is deceased and dead and shot by the police. So all bets are off. I mean, this guy is going to look, I would suggest, for something, perhaps a hard target, a police station, maybe a medical center. It's just, God only knows what he intends to do at this point. Certainly, he's not, he's out to kill people. So you would look for any of those installations where he could inflict mass harm.
Chris, as far as our intelligence gathering, what do you think is going on behind the scenes right now? What are they trying to learn about these two men?
Well, this is a whole new landscape for us, and I'm sure the FBI has done a phenomenal job. Kudos to all the agencies that have done this work in the past few days. But it's a whole new thing, because all of a sudden we thought, oh, it's in the Middle East. Let's look at the Middle East. Well, this is not the Middle East. This is another gap. Al-Qaeda is not just in the Middle East. It's all over the world. And I would also say I don't think these guys are lone wolf. I hope and see the investigation that the results that these guys will have ties to some groups in Chechnya or in the Eastern Bloc. But I think the FBI and our agencies need to look at every possible factor involving these individuals, their ties, their schools, their background, and just they have to do their due diligence basically to get that.
All right. Well, we certainly are very grateful for both of you coming in and your expertise this morning. Christopher Hinn, Jamie Copenhaver, thank you both very much. It is 8:11 right now. We're going to take a quick commercial break.
Stay with us. Much more still to come. 8:11 here on Fox 35 on Good Day.
Again, that is the latest. And again, that crystal clear photo, when compared with the pictures from right outside the Boston Marathon bombing, all those surveillance pictures, when you look at those together, obviously, there's very clear resemblance. We've got those photos posted for you now.
Yeah, this is a man that's his face has now been seen a number of times just in the past 12 hours. And of course, the video that we saw as well. We want to bring in our experts as well to talk a little more about this.
All right. So like right now, let's introduce you to Jamie Copenhaver and Christopher Hinn. If you've just been joining us, Jamie Copenhaver is a private investigator with a very strong background in law enforcement. And of course, Christopher Hinn is our Middle East expert, a longtime Middle East expert. Thank you both, gentlemen, for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Jamie, if you could talk to us a little bit about what we're seeing here. Obviously, they pushed the media way back from that original location. That was something that certainly did not surprise you. No,
very good sign that that's occurred. They have some intelligence that put the bad guy in this house. We're starting to build the puzzle from the general public now. Now we know that these two brothers have an uncle that lives close by. So rest assured the FBI has that uncle in custody, doing an extensive interview and trying to gain as much intelligence as possible.
Chris, we talked a little bit about trying to get in the mind. So many people are trying to understand this is different than Middle East, Chechen a little bit. We talked a little bit in the break. What are some things maybe behind either his training or that might have motivated this? And everybody's different, but certainly you have an amazing background on that specific field.
Well, first, they're so totally apart in backgrounds. It's actually interesting. But the fact is that they are trained, either trained by groups or they're trained by militia groups or by to destruct, to destroy, to kill, to commit murder as they did. That part is where the training of individuals who are either become hateful, which I'm having a real hard time with, is what is it about the United States that this group, the Eastern Bloc, dislikes? And we have not been able to figure this one out. But again, it's a matter of focusing on this group. Now, what you're going to find, one of the earlier we discussed with Jamie, is that the family values here, these guys are very, very close ties, or their uncles or their family. They're going to be in a community where they're all from the same area, either Russia or Serbia or the Eastern Bloc. They will tie down together as a knit group. So that's something I think the FBI, I'm sure they'll do in their due diligence in finding out who the surrounding groups are right here in Boston.
Chris, we should alert our viewers that the Associated Press has just come down with this. This is from Russia, letting us know that the father of I guess that both of them, they were brothers, the father of the Boston bombing suspect says son is accomplished medical student and a true angel. It's interesting, I think, that when we hear the perspective of the people who are closest to the terrorists, they often describe them in terms that we can't even wrap our heads around, considering what they are alleged to have done. Is that something that we often hear associated with terrorists, is that they almost have a split personality, Chris?
Well, it's not just the terrorists. I think it's a cultural issue. In the Middle East, we all say, my brother and I are against my cousin, and my cousin and I are against the outside world. Same thing in Russia or in the Eastern Bloc or Europe. They stick together. They don't see the evil in their kids. They don't want to admit it, even if though they're criminals and they have committed crimes. They will cover it up as oversight, and that's something it's normal that we've seen over the years.
We talked about police department scanner, and they're saying now that this subject is posting online that I want to kill you all, you've killed my brother. And whether that's true or not, could he be in there posting? Possibly, but I guess that's the concern here, is that he knows what's unfolded over the past number of hours and kind of is literally backed into a corner here.
I think the bottom line is, as I said, they're going to stick together now. This is personal. It's no longer, he against the population. Now he is against the Boston police and the FBI and the government. That's what it is. And I think, again, I hope he would just change his mind and give up and face the consequences.
Jamie, if you could talk to us a little bit about what might be going through the minds of law enforcement right now as they try, if in fact they do have this 19-year-old suspected bomber surrounded, what is the mentality like to try to draw someone out as peacefully as possible? Because certainly they would rather take him alive than dead.
Well, we've heard that they've announced, through a bullhorn, come out with your hands up, give up. Obviously, that's not working, so they're going to escalate that to hopefully a negotiator and try to establish some communication with this person to get him to come out peacefully. just due to the sheer nature of this crime, I don't think they're going to spend a lot of time waiting on that. I think they're going to move quicker than normal to make sure that everything's contained and we have no more accidents or intentional acts.
You know, almost like, well, I hate to go back to Christopher Dorner again, but you had a very dangerous individual that was very knowledgeable of things, and they wasted little time, and we know how that ended. I wonder if they'll take that same aggressive approach here to make sure that this ends as quickly as possible and as safely as possible.
I think they have to. I mean, you know, you have the general public out there that these, you know, these poor citizens are exposed to. I just don't see them allowing anything further to happen with this guy. If they know he's in there, they have good intelligence, they're going to act quickly and swiftly to end this.
And if we could, Christopher, talk to you again a little bit about sort of the intelligence aspect of this and what they have been trying to glean, I imagine, over the last couple of days to try to pinpoint who these guys are. And I thought it was really interesting yesterday when sort of that misinformation was coming out about people that they were getting surveillance photos of who were in the crowd. You know, they originally pointed out a couple of teenage boys who had nothing to do with it. They thought maybe these are the guys. They finally put it out to the mass public last night and said, look, at 5 o'clock yesterday evening, these are the surveillance pictures. We need your help. We can't track these guys down. What does that say about what they may or may not have already known about them?
Well, I think the best decision was made is to utilize the public eyes and ears and outside the form of the FBI and the investigators and law enforcement. I think the best tool that, you know, we keep saying, if you see something, say something. Well, this is if you see something, call us. And obviously someone did see those individuals, but yet, you know, this investigation took place until yesterday in one direction, and today started a whole new direction, especially now knowing where these guys are originally from. So it states a whole different ballgame for us.
And Chris, what might be the reaction from other regions now? Some you'd have to think a sense of relief when they hear where these guys are from, and not only that, but also Homeland Security here in the U.S. How might that change after this?
That's so true. I just got a call, actually. I was standing here and I was couldn't answer, but I did later. What happened is that they're relieved. The Middle East is relieved because it's not us. You know, we haven't done anything here. But in the initial, as you remember, the part of the investigation began, they were focusing on the Middle Easterns and the mentality of our DHS and the government. That's where suicide bombers began. That's where terrorism, which is not true, but yet that's what we're educated, and we need to expand our education outside the box.
Oh, and it's such a good point. I think sometimes that we forget, sadly, that as Americans we are often very hated in other parts of the world, and not just in the Middle East, as we've experienced with these two men who are apparently from Chechnya. But I imagine, as someone who has been a member of the intelligence community for many years, this probably was not surprising to you, Christopher.
Well, I would not use the word hated. I think we're misunderstood. And the reason I say that, I just did a cultural class in Abu Dhabi last week, and I asked 25, 30 people in the class, what's your thought of the U.S.? They just don't understand us. That's what they told me. So in a sense, we just need to expand our education to our law enforcement and communicate better in the future with our allies. If we call them allies, let's utilize them and let them help us understand better that region.
We saw after 9/11 how really Homeland Security changed so much. In fact, it was created at that time, and even the screening of people coming in and out of the country changed. Will this have a similar effect, maybe in a different way, that face is a little different maybe than we expected?
We have to expand again our, we cannot call it profile because, you know, that's something we cannot use the word, but we need to expand our intel to understand other region and what they do and why do certain things against us. And that's the one thing that we need to do.
Let's talk a little bit, too, about the communication amongst these guys. And one of the things that I remember them talking about earlier in the week is that one of the suspects was on his cell phone in some of those surveillance photos that were taken right there at the finish line of the marathon. And Jamie, if you could talk a little bit about this, about sort of how these guys communicate with each other and sort of how they go covert so that the intelligence community can't pick up on what they're up to.
You know, they're probably changing phones very frequent. They're buying burner phones, which would be a lesser than a normal provider, and disposing of those phones every 20, 30, 40 days, whatever the case is. Rest assured, the federal agents, I guarantee you, are looking for that intelligence and going back historically, trying to put together a footprint of who they've communicated with via phones, text messages, and emails. I guarantee that's happening in the background as we watch this.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what that suspect has with him in terms of communication or weapons, considering they've been on the run now for a number of hours. Gentlemen, thanks. We'll continue to pick that up here in a little bit. We need to
But Chris, talk to me a little bit about how it's possible for some of these terror cells to go unnoticed. We've already heard from Janet Napolitano earlier in the week saying that there was no chatter. They are not aware of any plans to do anything at the Boston Marathon on Monday. How do these guys manage to go unnoticed?
Well, I think we have become so complacent since 9/11, and I hate to say it, but Hal brought a good point. The shooting in Washington D.C., the snipers. But what we need to understand is that intelligence cannot stop.